So, and also just to clarify, I'm actually, those of you who have met before know that I'm somewhat cynical. And part of my job isn't simply to tell you the secret to making policy result in specific built projects. Part of my personal objective is to introduce some critique, some critical thinking about how much policy can do at all. And I think we all need to be mindful, we all need to be honest about what these changes can and cannot do. And I think part of the conversation about what we want to do with our policy needs to be informed by, again, being realistic about what difference it might make. Sometimes policy, I should say often, policy does nothing at all. As Craig said, developers can still go and apply for zone changes as long as they're consistent with the community plan. And it happens all the time. And when our policies fail, that's what developers do. The developers say, we can't do anything given these rules, so we're going to go change the rules. And that's actually a very convincing argument for the city council. And it's one of the reasons why zone changes are so common in the city. Because when the rules don't work, they have to get broken for every project. So it's a challenge to write rules that will actually work for the projects that we want to see built. Another thing that happens quite often when we make policy is it has the opposite effect of what we want. So a good example of that, I think, is actually Silver Lake, where we tried to contain housing development in Silver Lake. And the result is there's just not a lot of new development there. And so every hipster who moves into Silver Lake is taking an apartment that used to belong to a low-income family because we didn't build enough hipster housing in Silver Lake. And so this is my opinion. I invite disagreement. And then the third thing that can happen when policy is made is it actually has the consequences that we want it to. But we need to remember that the purpose of zoning is not to create. Often, when we talk about city plans, we talk about zoning, we think about it in this common sense way. The city says, we're going to let high-rises go up here. And so we think that that is the same thing as the city building high-rises. And anybody who's ever been to South Los Angeles knows that what the plans say and what gets built are completely different. South Los Angeles is zoned to be far, far denser than it is. But because the market's not there and no developers are willing to come forward and actually build there, except for some affordable housing developers, the plans that the city made are just plans that are waiting for somebody to come in with the money and the desire to do something. And so I just want that to inform this conversation. Again, the plans we make may do nothing at all. They may have the opposite consequences of the ones that we want, and they also may open the door for the sorts of things that we want. So with that, L.A. Moss provided several different scenarios, and I wasn't here. I was doing Hanukkah with my kids, so sorry that I missed the beginning. But I'm interested in what your reaction was to these scenarios. And these scenarios, by the way, I think you discussed this, are different sort of prototype options that you might choose in how to alter the queue conditions. And just to reiterate, one of them is to not do anything with the queue conditions at all. One of them is to make some changes with the intent of encouraging adaptive reuse. And notice I say with the intent of, because the queue conditions, again, don't actually do anything. They just say that it's easier or harder for a developer making an application to get approved. That's all the queue conditions do. They make it easier or harder for a developer to get a project approved. Another one would be changes to the queue conditions to encourage, with the intent of encouraging housing. And I guess those are the three. And so I won't go over Helen, should I go over the details of the content of these, or should we just simply go into the conversation about the reactions?
Conversations.
How will these changes will benefit the low-income families on this area?
Well, again, I'm here to ask you. I want to hear what your reactions were to these proposals. And again, remember that there are two things we might react to. One of them is the intent of the queue conditions. Some of you might say, I would like to encourage adaptive reuse because I think that's going to be good for the community. And that's important to know. And then the second thing we want to know is, well, does this proposal in the queue condition actually help that outcome happen or not? People might say, I want to encourage housing because I want to help the low-income community. And then the question is, will these changes actually do something that might help in that regard? So let's start with the intent of the Q conditions, of the intents that are out here on the posters. Who wants to say how they feel about it?
I just want to ask, when you say low-income housing, what percent of development would be required to be low-income?
Well, this proposal here, actually, I don't think says anything about the income levels, but that's an important thing.
Even the word term, low-income housing, I'm wondering.
I just said housing. This gentleman asked how long we're
that's
having.
what, okay, all right.
Yeah.
There is a state law that incentivizes developers to build low-income affordable housing. And affordable is defined in federal terms, in terms of how much you make relative to the people in this area, in the area, the general LA County area. And there is no, right now developers have the ability to build affordable housing. They have to get tax credits, and one thing that happens is that if they build enough affordable housing, they can have a building that's taller or that's bigger. And that's something that is a state law that the city implements, but there's nothing here that's saying that that's going to happen. If it happens, it's because the developers are abiding by certain incentives and taking advantage of tax credits, because that's mostly how low-income housing gets built.
So maybe the easiest way to think of an affordable housing project is at least a quarter of the units, of all the apartment units, are for low-income families, and a low-income family is making less than half of the median income for an area. It's real generic. It's so it's about a quarter.
You wonder what requirement.
I wonder what the ratio was to the.
State law is 20%.
Yeah, it's about 20%. So let's just do a quarter.
And again, that is the, just to be totally clear, that is the amount of affordable housing you have to include in order to go outside of the zoning envelope.
That's what I'm wondering, what we're talking presented to us.
Okay, great. Yes, sir.
The fact that the problem we have here is that when the market goes up, the housing and everything, the people start coming in, then the people that start coming in can afford it. And so that, like I said, defines affordable for the new people that are coming into these neighborhoods. And so what happens to the people before that, before the market, before everything happens? And then they can't afford it anymore.
Right, so the question, so actually, I believe that is part of the intent here. Again, do we want to risk a Silver Lake type gentrification, where we don't build new housing for the newcomers, and instead the newcomers have to take the housing that people who are already here have? That's the implication of this. So do we build housing for people coming into the neighborhood, or do we try to build affordable housing so the people who are already here can move from their current houses into that housing and then let the rich people move into the housing that the poor before? So there are a variety of options here. Yeah, please.
You said take.
What do you mean by take?
Okay.
Take the house.
Thank you for allowing me to clarify that. What I mean is when in a Silver Lake type situation, the reality is people are not taking housing from each other. It's somebody vacates a unit, and then somebody can move into that unit. And in gentrifying neighborhoods, what tends to happen is, because low-income families move very frequently, because jobs change, family situations change, life changes. And so gentrifying neighborhoods, actually, low-income families move out less rapidly than in non-gentrifying neighborhoods. The services are getting better and people tend to hang on a little bit more. But in a non-gentrifying neighborhood, when a low-income family moves out, another low-income family moves in. In a gentrifying neighborhood, a low-income family moves out, a higher-income family moves in. And so the question is, do you want it to be just this one-for-one, where somebody leaves and somebody else moves in, or do you want to create the capacity so people can move in even while other people aren't moving out? And so
That's what's happening right now. People are being forced to move out. It's happening. So it's not like we will or we cool. It's happening.
Renters are being forced.
What do you mean renters?
Not owners necessarily. I mean, you don't
Not
have
yet,
to-
not yet, but
You
not
don't
yet.
have to sell
Not
your house.
yet. Once the
Eventually it will happen.
Okay, so let me ask the question.
so renters are less
Let's-
important than
let's
the
react-
owners.
Let's react to this.
Jesus.
Encourage housing. Do we want to encourage the development of more housing in Toronto? Who?
So that creates more